Well, good morning. Welcome everyone to Vancouver and to Globe 2014, the 13th edition of the Globe series on the business of the environment. For those of you that are new to Vancouver, I welcome you to the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, where we are meeting today, and I extend their greetings to you as well. Since our first Globe event in 1990, and not that I can see, but I think there's a lot of young people here, so I would say probably some of you may not have been born by then. We have seen a profound transformation in our physical world, the global economy, and civil society. Remember, 1990 was when the Cold War ended. West and East Germany reunited. Nelson Mandela was released from prison. 1990, the world had 5 billion people. Today it's 7 billion. The global GDP has doubled, and China has risen as an economic superpower. At the same time, we've had a virtual upheaval in business attitudes, public opinion, and governmental policies, particularly those that are critical to environmental issues, global warming, energy and the environment, urban sustainability, and corporate accountability. The financial crisis of 2008 has resulted in rethinks, resets, in some cases rewrites. And I think it's fair to say we are in a time of uncertainty, but perhaps also a time of renewal. And I'm happy to say that Globe has remained a constant, although hopefully an evolving one through that time period. Globe has been and continues to be a platform for dialogue, for the expression of leading-edge ideas, a showcase for innovative technologies, and solutions to the world's toughest environmental problems, except we don't see them as problems. They're challenges, and by working together, we turn these challenges into opportunities, and in particular, business opportunities. Over the next 3 days, you'll hear from some of the world's finest minds who will speak about the challenges and opportunities that face us individually and collectively, and how we might deal with them to make the world a better place. And we're delighted this morning to have some top leaders from government and business to help set the stage for what I promise will be 3 days of excitement, inspiration, and action in our journey toward a greener global economy. One of these leaders is the Premier of your host province of British Columbia, the Honourable Christy. Since becoming Premier in 2011, she is focused on creating jobs for the people of British Columbia in a sustainable and forward-looking manner. Re-elected last spring, she's been resolute in strengthening BC's economy through the wise development of BC's natural resources, including the natural gas opportunity, by growing international trade, strengthening the skills training to make sure British Columbians will benefit from the jobs that will come from a clean and green economy. And I'm proud to say that we at Globe have been working very closely with the government of British Columbia to understand more fully the enormous investment, promotion, and job creation potential of a greener economy. Now, please join me in welcoming the Premier of British Columbia, the Honourable Christy Clark.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, John. We are so proud, John, of what you've done and the work that you do in Globe and bringing so many great forward, progressive thinkers to our city and our province this year. And to all of you who are with us, who are visiting from somewhere else in particular, welcome. Welcome to Vancouver, welcome to British Columbia, and of course, welcome to Globe. Each of you who is here is making a contribution. Each of you is sharing your ideas about what the future should look like, and how public policymakers and businesses and social enterprises and nonprofits can influence and make that future better. And as you do that, I'd like to tell you a little bit about British Columbia's story. The Globe sessions have always been about exchange, about change, about talking about how the ground is shifting and how we can embrace that change as it shifts. So I have a little story for you to start off about change. There's a well-known newspaper columnist based in Victoria who's named Les Lane, and he was telling me recently he went to speak to a class of elementary school children about the things that they could look forward to in their future, about job opportunities, and he talked to them about becoming a newspaper journalist. And he said that he breezed through all the questions until it got very close to the end, and then one little boy in the back of the class stood up and cleared his throat, and he said, "Yes, but Mr. Lane, what is your future in a paperless society?" Now, of course, the moral of that story is there are a number, I think, in that. And first of all, I think most importantly, it is that while we as a generation, I speak for myself, I suppose, are trying to figure out often how to manage and how to slow down, and in some cases, how to stop change, young people are already in that change. They live it, they experience it. It is already their world, no matter how hard policymakers seem determined to resist it. The other thing, of course, I was reminded of is that children always ask those very tough questions. Like, I have a 12-year-old son at home, and he's about at that age. Questions like, "Mom, why do we go to church when so many wars are started in the name of religion?" Or, "Mom, why is it that adults seem so determined to destroy social media?" Or, "Mom," as he asked me on the plane the other day on the way back from the U.S., "why is it that they're so interested in making me turn off my phone when it's in my hand, but they never ask me to turn off my phone when it's in my bag?" That was a question I didn't have a good answer for. But one of the things that kids always remind us, I think, is that we do need to have good answers. They remind us that the answers that we come up with for each other often won't cut it. This Globe session was Globe was started in 1990, as John said, and it was created as a forum to really encourage new thinking. Because we on this planet cannot continue to do business in the way that we always have. We must confront and embrace change. We must decide we cannot resist it, and that we are going to live the future as our children do. We must remember that we cannot say, "Never mind, don't think about it," or "it's not happening" when it comes to climate change. We cannot ignore the concerns of local citizens when they are experiencing development in their home communities. We cannot decide that we just want to bulldoze ahead despite opposition, despite concerns, without spending time talking and exchanging as you do here at Globe. And we cannot use the economy as an excuse to ignore the environment. Through many years of growth, governments have, over this last decade in particular, pursued all kinds of environmentally progressive policies. But about 5 years ago, there was another great change, and that was called the Great Recession. It taught us all of us, no matter what strata of society we occupy, that we cannot take economic growth for granted. It is, in times of growth, a lot easier to jump into the race to be greenest. What we discovered is that never mind the cost of a policy, or in a few cases that have been identified since, despite whether or not the policy could be proven to make any difference, governments would charge ahead when the economy was doing well. I'm talking about investments that we made, that governments around the world made in false economies that were exposed when the real economy collapsed. And the danger in that is that we can set ourselves back many, many years when we are trying to make progress. And we cannot afford to let that happen. So now, in these times of sluggish economic growth, we are challenged as we never have been before to find ways to protect and improve ecosystems, to protect our water, our land, our air, to make sure that we find a way to do that while our economies are still fragile. So here's the opportunity. I believe that we can build a case for climate action, for environmental stewardship, and that we can do that in the context of a growing economy and job creation. That's what we are working toward here in British Columbia, toward making a real difference in the world's environment, while at the same time creating wealth here at home. Now, why, you ask, would anybody want to do it any other way? And of course, I think that seems obvious to all of us in this room. And that's the future that I want to talk to you a little bit about today. But first, I want to tell you about where we are today in British Columbia and about the roots of sustainability in our province, our history of environmental activism. Today, in BC, we are still the first jurisdiction in North America to enact a carbon tax, the only one with a pure tax on carbon. And in the first 4 years after introducing that tax, we have managed to decrease our reliance on petroleum by 7%, even as the rest of Canada increased their consumption by 4%. We managed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions at the same time, the greenhouse gas emissions that are covered by the carbon tax, by almost twice the rate of those same emissions in the rest of the country. And at the same time, our economy grew faster than the national average. And this last piece, which I think explains why our economy continued to grow, is that the tax was revenue neutral. We returned $300 million in tax cuts to taxpayers because as the carbon tax went up, other taxes went down. Our experience as an innovator in this has been a great success, so successful that Washington, Oregon, and California are all signing on to put a price on carbon. We are working together in what we call the Pacific Coast Collaborative, and together we are one region that represents the 5th largest economy in the world, one with a common cause on climate action, a region up and down the west coast of North America that I would argue where we have more in common with each other than any of us do with our friends in the East. We are achieving a carbon neutral government here, the first in North America, and we are expanding further through energy efficiency for the broader public sector, schools, hospitals, universities, colleges, so that we can reduce our carbon footprint across government, but also save taxpayers money on their energy bills in the long term. That is the right thing to do, and it is also very good for our bottom line. Now, you would scarcely know it walking around. I think if you have had the chance to walk around a little bit in Vancouver, it is a beautiful and prosperous and modern city without a lot of visible industry. What you may not know is that 2 out of every $3 in our economy comes from some of the most far-flung places on the continent, some of the most rural places you'll find. In the interior, in the northwest, in the northeast, 2 out of every $3 produced in British Columbia comes from our thriving resource sector. So it is crucially important that our forestry, our mining, our natural gas industries, which operate in those remote communities, lead the world in sustainable and responsible environmental practice. And we like to think that here in BC we have become a bit of an expert in something that we call social license. And in fact, it was a British Columbian who came up with the term social license in the first place. He's with us today. His name is Jim Cooney. Jim, do you want to stand up if you're here? Where's Jim? Is Jim here? There's Jim. Jim came up with the term social license when he was a mining executive in the 1990s. He was working to make the case for how you can get to yes for economic development in communities that want to have a say. In communities where often development is confronted, in the first instance, by a flat no. Well, of course, what Jim realized is that there are lots of ways to get to yes. But the only way that really is durable, the only way that really works, is to acquire social license in order to pursue development. That means listening to citizens so that economic development works for the people in the regions where the money is being made. And that always means ensuring that the people who live beside or on top of the resources that are being extracted garner some benefit from that in the long term. Finding social license means finding ways through that tension that always exists between protecting our environment, protecting the land that people live in, and also creating employment and long-term economic benefits. That's what Jim talked about when he created that word. And now it is a word, a British Columbia word, that is being used all over the world. Our values here are this: to leave our children with more opportunities, economic opportunities, than we had. To leave this place we are so blessed to live in as magnificent and pristine as it was when we found it. And third, to build and have the means to build and sustain the kind of compassionate society that will survive the test of time. You cannot do that by shrinking away from risk, shrinking away from opportunity, or by ignoring your long-term responsibilities. So in forestry, an example is how far the industry has come from the battles around clear cutting in Clayoquot Sound on the west coast of Vancouver Island. The industry did not shrink from those challenges. Instead, they found a way to grow, a way to collaborate, a way to cooperate, and a way to do it right. And so now today, forestry is again a very profitable business in our province because they are innovating, they are embracing change, they are creating bioenergy from forest waste, building energy-efficient wood buildings in China and the developing world. Through the BC Forest Carbon Partnership, planting 1 million trees to renew our forests and reduce our carbon footprint. Today, our mining industry operates under one of the most rigorous regulatory frameworks you'll find anywhere in the world. And they go far beyond that. They are funding, developing, utilizing innovative new technologies that will save energy, reduce emissions. Things like finding better ways to sort waste rock. They are inking deals with First Nations that mean long-term employment and long-term revenue in some of BC's most impoverished communities. And today, our natural gas business has a 60-year record of responsible recovery, and they are moving forward fast with new ways of reusing wastewater for extraction so that they can protect our drinking water supply, new ways to capture carbon and methane emissions, along with new uses for liquefied natural gas. LNG is powering commercial trucks, transit buses, and soon all of the ships in our large coastal ferry fleet, because switching to LNG saves money and it produces about 30% fewer emissions. Today, liquefied natural gas represents the biggest contribution that our province can make to the world in the battle against climate change. Because by liquefying our 150-year supply, our vast surplus, which we will never be able to use entirely ourselves, by exporting that abundant and clean natural gas, we can help those fast-growing economies in Asia reduce their dependence on energy sources like coal and oil. And I'll give you an example of that. In China, they're planning to increase natural gas by just a fraction so that they can displace coal for power generation. They are planning to increase their use of natural gas by 4%. Just that fraction of increase in use of natural gas results in a reduction by the most conservative estimates of 93 megatons of greenhouse gases every year. That equivalent, their 4% increase in the use of natural gas to displace coal, is the equivalent of shutting this entire province down. Every building, every hospital, every car on the road, shutting them down for 1.5 years. That is what China will achieve by moving just a fraction of their coal production to natural gas. And we know from recent studies that pollution in China doesn't just affect people in China, although we should be very concerned about that. It also travels across the Pacific, increases the number of smog days in Los Angeles. It affects the quality of air here and everywhere along the West Coast. Pollution knows no boundaries. So imagine if we do not accept natural gas as a clean economic alternative to burning oil and coal. Imagine what it would mean if we failed to do that. Failing to do that means accepting a world in which economies continue to grow their reliance on the cheapest and the dirtiest fossil fuels. LNG is a transitional fuel, but it is the cleanest of all the fossil fuels on Earth. And it has an important role to play in the world today. Here in British Columbia, it could create 100,000 new jobs. It could help us pay down our provincial debt. It could help accelerate innovation in our clean tech sector. It could mean that we are able to innovate even further, not just in making natural gas cleaner, but in also making forestry and mining better businesses for the environment. Already one investor here has entered into a partnership with UBC on clean tech research. They're doing that because one of the things that we are insisting on here is that the natural gas that we liquefy and produce will be the cleanest LNG produced anywhere in the world. Now, for those of you who have traveled here today, I'd like to say thank you. I'd like you to say thank you for engaging in this exchange and for visiting what we think is a really lovely city. And I'd like to leave you with this. British Columbia is very much open for business. We are open for business, in particular, the business of leaving our province, our country, and our world in better shape than we found it. We are very much your partners, and we want to work with you. We want to create jobs. We want to create sustainable jobs. We want to create the kind of prosperity that our children can build on rather than have to fix when it's their turn to lead. If you are here from British Columbia, you will know this about our province. For generations, we have worked to build a responsible resource economy. It's what's grown our province. It's what sustained generations of our families. And we haven't gotten to this place by saying no. We haven't gotten to a place, to one of the best economies in Canada and one of the best economies in North America by being overwhelmed by problems, by ignoring risks. We have done it by looking at them head on, looking them in the eye, and deciding that we are up to the challenge, that we are unafraid to take on difficult ideas, that we are unafraid of change. Whether it's our 5 conditions when it comes to moving heavy oil across from Alberta to the Pacific coast, whether it's earning social license to operate in forestry, mining, and natural gas, whether it's our sustainable food and aquaculture industries, whether it's creating the cleanest LNG in the world. That is how we do business in British Columbia, and it works. In difficult economic times, it is always much harder to come up with good answers. But in my experience, the hardest answers to come up with are almost always the best ones. The ones where we challenge ourselves and we have to work and grind to get to a conclusion. Those are the answers that are durable. Those are the ones that our kids will say were obvious, but were nonetheless wrenching for us to get to. And those are the answers that we are challenged to come up with today. Our task is to build a growing economy, to create jobs, and at the same time, leave a better world for future generations where they have a real chance to build their dreams. That is the marker that our generation must lay down. And it is our turn to deliver for them. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Premier. Thank you for those words of encouragement, and your drive and commitment is what's going to make this a better world, but also British Columbia as an example for the world. So we're proud to be here and proud to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Now, although he comes from half a world away, I suspect our next speaker shares many of the views expressed by Premier Clark on the role of government in greening the economy. Lord Ian Livingstone brings an added dimension to these issues, drawn from his extensive business career. Lord Livingstone, a Conservative member of the House of Lords, was appointed Minister of State for Trade and Investment this December, so he's been 3 months in the job. I'm not sure this is his first major speech, but I hope it's one of the key ones. He leads the UK's Foreign and Commonwealth Office relations with British business. But before his career in politics, he served as Chief Executive Officer of the British Telecom Group from 2008 until 2013, making BT one of the best performing European telco stocks. Please welcome Lord Ian Livingstone.
Good morning, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be in one of my favourite cities in the world. I would also like to thank, before I start, Premier Christy Clark and the BC government for the work they do, but particularly for their support for Globe, which has been exemplary. And of course, to John Weeb, who not only for his kind introduction, but for all the work that he and the Globe team over many, many years have done in putting on what is one of the foremost trade shows and conferences in its area. It's a wonderful opportunity to network, to do business, and help solve the many commercial and environmental problems we have. As John said, I'm 3 months as a minister. I was 30 years a businessman, and I hope no time ever as a politician. But it's an opportunity for me to talk to you actually as a business person, because I guess, unlike some people in government, I've been there at the hard end. I know some of the challenges and choices businesses have to do. And I want to just use something from my own past experience, just as how you can square the circle, and very much echoes what the Premier said. My company, British Telecom, we accounted for something over 0.5% of all energy consumption in the UK. A big number. But we set a target, or now they set a target, of an 80% reduction in emissions, and on track to achieve that. 100% of the energy of BT is now bought in the UK from renewable resources. That's delivered not only key environmental savings, but £100 million a year in cost savings. And we said as a business, well, that's not enough. We want to do more, because I am a great believer that businesses are not the problem. Businesses are so often the solution. And they can do it in ways that not only help themselves, but help society. What BT said is that by 2020, they intend to save their customers 3 times as much carbon as the company itself produces, by using things such as video conferencing, low energy data centers, and new and innovative technologies that cut carbon emission, reduce travel, and improved efficiency in companies, smart grids, smart cities, etc. So a 3 times saving by 2020. Now that, of course, again, is good for the environment. I should also add, it's great for the people in the business. The 100,000 people who worked in that company were absolutely enthused by that vision and notion, because they cared every bit as much about their children's future as anyone else in this room. But also, BT intend to sell the products that would achieve that for their customers. Good for the environment, good for business. It goes together. And I'm going to say a bit more about that, and particularly what we in the UK government are trying to do to put the UK at the forefront of the climate change discussions and actions. Before I do that, though, I feel I've come a long way, so it's good to talk a little bit about the UK and its relationship with Canada. And the UK and Canada's relationships are very, very much intertwined. The UK and Canada are unique. We are the only nations who are not only members of the G8, or maybe G7 plus, who knows, the G20, the Commonwealth, and NATO. We sit round a lot of tables together, and we're delighted to do it. The UK is Canada's third largest export market. Bilateral trade in goods and services is around 27 billion Canadian dollars. And it's not just about business, it's a people thing as well. Something over 50% of people in British Columbia claim some British ethnicity. And indeed, I'm in Vancouver, twinned with the city I come near from, Edinburgh. There's lots of things that Vancouver and the city I now live in, London, are very similar to each other. Look outside, look at the rain. And this preoccupation with house prices. I've got to tell you, in Vancouver, you really haven't lived if you want to see central London prices. However, it's a topic of conversation in both cities. But turning to the wider UK economy, because it's worth talking about that, because I know Vancouver tends to look towards the Pacific, which is hugely important. But I come from Europe and I come from the UK. And the UK is doing pretty well now. Forecast GDP growth for this year is looking to be around 3%. Unemployment is 7% and falling quite significantly. And inflation, 1.7%. Some really good numbers, particularly for the naysayers who talked just a few months ago about triple-dip recessions. It actually reminds me of a comment I think it was J.K. Galbraith said the only purpose of economic forecasts are to give astrology a good name. He had a point. And that's good news for Canada. Why is it good news for Canada? Well, the UK is Canada's second largest destination for foreign direct investment after that little country to the south of this border. We've got 700 Canadian companies have operations in the UK in many of our key and most high-profile industries, and they're very, very welcome. In the environmental sector, I'd just like to pick up one company, a British Columbian company, Endurance Wind, is opening up a wind turbine manufacturing facility in the Midlands of the UK near Birmingham. And I'll be meeting many BC-based companies later on who are investing in the UK. I know that the UK trade body, UK Trade and Investment across Canada, is working hard to support 120 Canadian companies looking to expand in or within the UK. So if you want to be added to them, and I don't apologise for the advert, I'll make it. Please feel free to contact the Consulate General here in Vancouver. We like to keep him busy. It's such a nice city. He needs to be doing something during the day. So we share a lot of business, and we also share, of course, a love of great events. London and Vancouver have shared fantastic experience of hosting recently the Olympic and Paralympic Games. It would have been easy in the build-up to let the doubters have their say. Not enough snow. And that was just London. Definitely too much rain, that was both of us. Not enough security, transport, etc., etc., etc. And what did we do? We put on the best 2 Olympic Games in history. And I'm particularly proud to say that London 2012 was one of the most environmentally friendly games ever. It was set up to be a green games. But we should learn something else from the Olympics. The doubters said it couldn't be done, and it was done. And that is also true in the environmental field. There are so many doubters who say we can't achieve. Of course there's challenges. There are real challenges. The challenges of how making changes to renewable energy will affect electricity and gas bills. It's a challenge we have in the UK and in Europe generally. Of how we make the transition, particularly for industries who are high energy users. How you help the losers whilst promoting the winners. And they're all challenges. But as the Premier said, the best things are often the most difficult things. And we can make these challenges. Now, I mentioned the Olympics, and I will also mention, again, because it's my home city, Commonwealth Games. Canada, I'm sure, will get lots of medals coming to Glasgow this year. Also, as part of that, we are going to have a business festival that goes with it, a business symposium. And one of the key areas in that business symposium will be looking at the sector theme of renewables and green energy. So I say to all of you here, think about coming to Glasgow, as well as actually we're doing a similar event in Liverpool International Festival of Business. Because when you come here, you will hear from Europe, you will hear from around the Commonwealth of what is happening to help green energy, to help renewables, to help carbon emissions. And that really brings me to what I'm here to talk about. How we look in the UK to this challenging subject. Well, first, the big picture. The UK government has set some really big targets. We aim to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by over a third by 2020 and by 80% by 2050. These are challenging targets, but without putting these challenging targets, we wouldn't be doing the work we are doing. So what is that work? Well, first of all, we've set up key industrial strategies, particularly around areas which carbon emissions are very important and can help reduce it. So offshore wind, and I'll say a little bit about that in a second. But also in areas such as transport design, city design, where we can make real changes. We have catapult centres, which bring together government policy, government money, industry, and critically R&D and universities to help come up with innovative solutions to the problems we have, both in business and the environment. And a Green Investment Bank, which was set up just a few years ago. It has a double challenge. It's a very similar challenge to business. The bottom line of its green impact and the bottom line of its financial impact. And the government has put something over $1 billion Canadian dollars. We did put it in pounds, but translate, $1 billion Canadian dollars. And that has generated, and I think you can see the impact of government leverage, around $5 billion Canadian dollars worth of private investment. I suspect some of that may indeed be in the pension funds that some of you have in Canada, who are big investors in the UK, and we welcome them. We also have the Green Deal, which provides loans to individuals to install energy-reducing work to homes, because it's not only the emissions of the energy you use, it's also about using less energy. And the Green Fund provides grants to NGOs and charities to help promote energy efficiency and carbon reduction. And I'm delighted to be here in BC because the government of BC is taking huge action as well. I really look forward to hearing and comparing what both our governments are doing. I think particularly exciting is the Pacific Coast Action Plan. It shows it's not just national governments that make decisions. Local governments can make a key contribution as well. I also look forward to hearing shortly from Jim Balsillie about the Sustainable Development Technology Canada. The UK and British Columbia have a shared interest in sound stewardship of both our natural resources and, of course, our business environment. We all, whether you're individuals, business, or government, have a duty to curtail global warming, but it needs all of us to work together. It's a matter of our future and also, and we saw this recently in Ukraine, it's a matter of our shared security. But it's also a business opportunity. So as we develop our clean technology sectors, we also need to share this experience more widely, because sharing best practice from each other, our international partners, will generate greater growth and create jobs around the world. If we do this right, it won't in the long term hurt our economies. It will really help them. Tomorrow, I'm looking forward to joining a UK-BC forum on supporting environmental innovation, sharing best practice, including how this relates to natural gas and LNG development, a subject already talked about today. But for this policy, we do need businesses to step forward and help provide the solution. And I would argue it's a bit like the internet, and I was very much involved in the early days of the internet in the late 90s. And somebody at the time said, there's no such thing as an internet business because all businesses will be internet businesses. And I think that's true for clean tech. In many ways, there's no such thing as clean tech. All businesses will be interested and invested in clean tech. So with that caveat, and being said, I will mention something about the overall environmental sector in the UK. It's estimated to be worth to the UK £128 billion. It supports nearly 1 million jobs in the UK. One of the biggest areas is offshore wind farms. We have 17 offshore wind farms built around the UK, representing 2,700 megawatts of installed capacity, the highest, I think, by some distance in the world. And one of them is the London Array, the world's largest offshore wind farm, 630 megawatts of capacity. And I'm delighted it received Canadian investment of around about $1 billion Canadian dollars to support it. We are lucky in the UK. We have lots of coast and we have lots of wind. But I guess that's something in Canada you know about as well. We all must work in partnership, and I just want to highlight 3 examples of good partnerships. In November last year, a BC company called Earthcast organized the launch of a rocket from Kazakhstan to the International Space Station. On board, and this is the UK link, were 2 cameras made by the British research group Rutherford Appleton Labs. Now, why is that important? Well, once operational, anyone with internet access will be able to view near-live video feeds of our planet. This will help environmental researchers in areas such as habitat loss, air pollution, and a number of other areas that will help environmental research. And tomorrow, the National Industrial Symbiosis Programme will launch in Canada. Now that is based on a successful UK model developed by International Synergies. It's been implemented across the EU and in regions of China and South Africa. The programme has engaged thousands of businesses to transform waste into products. In addition to driving investment and innovation, it's helped reduce carbon emissions by 6 million tonnes over the last 5 years. Then there's Beyond Energy Code Consulting, a joint UK-Canadian venture, which helps achieve ever greater efficiency in our buildings. If you want to see more examples of what the UK can do, including what we can do together with Canada, please do look at our stalls on the trade floor. So I want to cover one more subject before concluding. Because I'm the Trade Minister, whilst I'm here, I do want to say something about free trade. It is important. It's important to the environment as well. For instance, recently it was agreed among various countries, freeing up the trade in green goods, taking away tariffs, removing barriers, because we need to trade in green goods. It will help the environment all around the world. But also, we have just signed recently the political agreement on CETA, the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement between the EU and Canada. I think this is hugely important. As I keep on saying, business goes hand in hand with prosperity and the environment. This agreement potentially gives Canada access, well, does give Canada access to 500 million people in the EU, the world's largest single trading bloc. It is estimated to be worth 12 billion Canadian dollars to the Canadian economy. It will mean some challenges. It will mean some changes. It will mean some more competition, which, by the way, will be good for Canadian consumers. But I would ask everyone here to embrace it, because the more we trade with each other, the more we can help create prosperity, and the more we can share ideas and products. opening up in the markets is good for innovation and it's good for ideas. So, to conclude, I talked a bit about business, I've talked a bit about academia, I've talked a bit about ideas, and I've talked a bit about government. And there's a purpose in doing all of that, because it needs all of these things to make the changes we all need, not just for our future, but I think more importantly, for our children and our grandchildren's future. As a government in the UK, we're going to try and do our bit. But we accept we are that small island just off the coast of Europe, and we can't do it on our own. But we are the 6th largest economy in the world, and we've got the 6th largest economy in environmental products. So we're going to try and do our bit, and we're going to work with our partners like Canada to do that. I would ask whether you're in government, whether you're in academia, whether you're in business, to work together to create the prosperity and the growth we all want. Together, we can do some great things for the environment. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Lord Livingston. Your blend of insights and are drawn from your career in business and the government, and brings home the importance of partnerships, as you pointed out in your last statements, and bring the public and private sectors together to develop strategies, policies, and programs that will lead us to a better world. Our next speaker is Jim Balsillie. He's the chairman of the board of Sustainable Development Technology Canada. In fact, there are very few people you could point to and say, he helped change the world as we know it. He's just that kind of person. He's the co-founder of RIM, which we now know as BlackBerry. And for those of you who, like me, who had my BlackBerry for many, many years, we thank Jim for that. He was recently appointed by the Government of Canada to chair the Board of Sustainable Development Technology Canada. This is a $1 billion-plus fund for the investment in sustainable technologies. Since leaving RIM, he has also founded the Centre for International Governments Innovation, CIGI, the Balsillie School of International Affairs, and the Canadian International Council. He's also co-founder of Communitech and was the private sector representative on the UN Secretary General's High Panel for Sustainability. Winner of the Mobile World Congress Lifetime Achievement Award, he's been named 3 times to Barron's World's 100 CEOs. He clearly brings a new perspective to the sustainable development technology game. Please welcome Jim Balsillie.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and Lord Livingston. It's a pleasure to join you today. Those were exceptional remarks. And John, thank you for that kind introduction and the invitation to share my thoughts on the subject of sustainability and innovation with you. And I heard a story recently that relates to my thinking about these subjects, so I'd like to share it with you. I'm not sure if it's a true story, but it might be. A Canadian environmentalist died and reported to the pearly gates. And St. Peter's checked his dossier carefully and says, "You're in the wrong place." Wondering how heaven could make such an error, the environmentalist reports to the gates of hell for eternity. And pretty soon, our friend gets dissatisfied with the environment in hell and starts implementing eco-friendly improvements. After a while, the temperature starts to stabilize, air and water and pollution under control. The landscape is now covered with grass and plants. The food is organic. The people damned in hell are now damn happy. And our friend, the environmentalist, becomes the toast of the underworld. One day, God calls Satan and says with a sneer, "So how's it going down there in hell?" And Satan replies, "Things are going great. We've got clean air, the food tastes better. There's no telling what this environmentalist is going to fix yet, next." God replies, "What? You've got an environmentalist? That's a mistake. He should never have gotten down there. Send him up to heaven right now." And Satan snarls back, "No way. I like having environmentalists on the staff." God says, "Send him back up or I'll sue." Satan laughs and answers, "Yeah, right. And just where are you going to get a lawyer?" So I hope the lawyers in the audience don't take offense to this story. Anyway, I like this story because it highlights the current state of nature, where environmentalists and non-environmentalists and their entrenched ideology have them stuck in an intractable lock. I want to spend this brief time we have together to discuss this heaven and hell dichotomy. And it strikes me it's almost impossible to argue against the benefits of sustainability. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying there are no climate change deniers out there, nor am I arguing that we should celebrate those who call for environmental protection at any cost. It is precisely these polarizing viewpoints on all sides of the ideological spectrum that keep us from moving forward in a meaningful way. A comprehensive Gallup poll conducted last year in the United States illuminates a precipitous decline in public interest in a broad set of environmental concerns. Since the 2008 financial crisis, there's been a dramatic surge in sentiment that when push comes to shove, the economy should be given priority over the environment. The compatibility between sustainability and economic growth are not yet self-evident to voters and investors alike. This is in no small part due to what Upton Sinclair once said, and I quote, "It is difficult to get a person to understand something when their salary depends on not understanding it." I am not suggesting that environmentalists are the only ones saddled with ideology. Economists have perpetuated many unhelpful myths on their own. Rethinking economics is a major imperative because it too is riddled with ideological theory. The famous economist Lionel Robbins once said, and I quote, "There is nothing in economics that relieves us of the obligation to choose." He is absolutely right. We must quantify the variables we face today to compensate for the limitations of rigid theoretical economics. We must incorporate the environment, water quality, air quality, soil enrichment as public goods. This is not radical thinking at work. We often speak of critical infrastructure, roads, bridges, sewers, even the internet as public goods. If you're driving on the majestic sea-to-sky highway right here in BC, it's easy to feel like our environmental landscape is critical to a way of living here. But in a macro context, the reality is that we don't incorporate the risks of environmental degradation in our economics. We don't cost out the instability caused by changing weather patterns. And most importantly, we do not value the public and private benefits of sustainability. Economics cannot ignore the issue of what objectives we wish to achieve as society. So the challenge for those of us that believe in both sustainability and prosperity is clear. We must collectively aspire to resolve this dichotomy in a manner that responsibly preserves our natural, economic, and social order. If I can boil all this down for you, I'm getting at one simple principle. To better enable societies to live sustainably, it needs to be good business. And for it to be good business, we require incentives and institutions that promote creative solutions. Solutions that bridge the gap between sustainability and prosperity by creating a virtuous circle between investment, technology, and governance. If done properly, sustainability can shift from pure aspirationalism to one centered on prosperity. It can be done. Let me share an admirable global example. South Korea. Korea's highly respected former Prime Minister Dr. Han Sang-soo served with me on the United Nations High Panel for Sustainability and came in as the staunchest advocate for green growth. During the global financial crisis of 2008, Korea, under Dr. Han's leadership, committed the majority of its fiscal stimulus plan for what could be characterized as green growth. And this was more than altruistic advocacy for the environment. There's something very subtle but very important about the OECD's Green Growth Strategy Report. It shows that Korea possesses the most intellectual property rights on renewable energy of any country in the world after the United States and Japan. For each year in the last decade, only Korean, Japanese, or American companies have been in the top 10 list of patent filers in the United States. In the tech sector, protectable ideas, known as IPR, are an important benchmark of opportunity and growth. What this ultimately means is that in Korea, the dichotomy between the economy and environment appears to be resolved. Green growth is good business. In Canada, we need to do a better job of building capacity in intellectual property rights so that our businesses in the clean tech sector and beyond can scale globally. When my home province, Ontario, sought out a green energy deal, it partnered with Korea's Samsung for solar and wind technologies. Now, I know a terse debate ensued whether or not this is a good business for Ontario, but I believe we can all agree it is certainly a good business opportunity for Korea. And if we want to discuss nuclear power, a traditional strength of ours in Canada, Koreans are successfully developing a variety of advanced reactors that create clean, affordable energy and high-paying jobs and export-based revenues. Unfortunately, the dichotomy between the economy and the environment is still very real here in Canada. Given our current capacities, radically reversing our natural resource policies is tantamount to economic and political suicide. But that doesn't mean the status quo is safe. We see the challenges facing the Northern Gateway right here in BC. They are front and center in Washington with Keystone. And the negative sentiments towards the oil sands in Brussels and other capitals around the world seem to be growing. What the ideologues here in Canada and the US and around the world refuse to see is that sometimes the other side has a point. I don't believe in framing the debate as a for or against the oil sands or industry generally, because the issues are far more complex. What I do think would be more useful is focusing the attention on how to make sustainability and environmental protection good business so that we don't find ourselves, like our American friends in the Gallup poll, choosing the economy over the environment. Now you're probably thinking I'm going to go in a diatribe on government inaction. I am not. Globally speaking, the level of public investment towards climate adaptation and mitigation has been significant relative to the levels of apathy among citizens. However, government is only one piece of the proverbial puzzle. The Center for International Governance Innovation, which I founded and chair, has done some critical thinking on the subject of climate financing. One of their primary conclusions is that given the enormity of the challenge, the private sector's participation in climate financing is critical if we are to limit temperature growth to 2 degrees between 2015 and 2050. The International Energy Agency estimates that to reduce carbon emissions by the required 50% by 2050, global investment needs to be $750 billion a year. To put this in context, this is $16 trillion between 2030 and 2050. Placing this squarely on the shoulders of government is just not practical. Public financing for sustainable development needs to evolve, similar to what we have seen for other critical infrastructure in the past generation. Governments cannot simply compensate for the private sector. They will come up far too short. They must play the role of catalyst in the marketplace. And we have a case in point how this can work right here in Canada. I have the privilege of chairing Sustainable Development Technology Canada. SDTC's mandate is to assist entrepreneurs in the clean tech sector achieve the double bottom line, growing their business globally while also materially addressing environmental sustainability issues. The Government of Canada, specifically our new Finance Minister, Joe Oliver, deserves credit for securing $325 million of new funding for SDTC when fresh fiscal resources were extremely scarce. I believe they worked hard to find these resources because SDTC is helping make clean tech good business. For every dollar we invest on behalf of the Government of Canada, the private sector has invested $14 in follow-on financing. The results have been staggering. Our portfolio includes 246 companies with a market cap of $2.2 billion. SDTC's catalyst role is gaining momentum. Last month, we secured a $15 investment from the natural gas industry to co-invest in clean technologies in their sector. And we continue to pick up speed because our investments are economically viable and making a tangible environmental impact. Let me give you a concrete example. Titanium Corporation is a Calgary-based clean tech company supported by SDTC and other private investors. They have developed technologies that can turn what is one of the oil sands' greatest liabilities, tailings, into valuable commodities. The environmental impact could be immense if this technology is successfully commercialized. Greenhouse gas emissions from mined bitumen could be reduced by 20%. Emissions from tailings could be reduced by 80%. River water could be reduced by 25% if this technology was adopted by the domestic sector. The best part for the oil industry, this technology has the potential to recover 28,000 barrels of bitumen a day. And Titanium Corporation, like all the companies we invest in, has global applications. I invite you all to visit SDTC in the exhibition hall to learn more about our funding opportunities and our portfolio of companies. I think you will agree we're helping bridge the gap between sustainability and prosperity in a meaningful way. It is through innovation that delivers both economic and environmental benefits that we will truly put ourselves on a path towards sustainability. For those of us who fundamentally believe environmental degradation is one of the greatest global issues today, we must aspire to reshape the economics that guide our daily lives. We must make the intangible valuable. We must invest in clean technologies that deliver financial and environmental returns and ensure these are available to as wide a user base as is possible. And we must do it soon. Thank you very much.